Hello viewers, and welcome to this week's edition of the Jctr Corner, a program brought to you by the Jctr for Theological Reflection in conjunction with Loyola TV. Today on the program, we're still looking at the issue of the coronavirus, which is being categorized as something which is so extensive and severe at the same time. You know, apart from the health crisis that the coronavirus brought about, we have noticed that the virus has also caused about the economic crisis characterized by the financial market stress as well as a collapse in commodity prices. Apart from that, the outbreak of the virus has also brought about some significant implications on the supply chain market, as well as it has created so many uncertainties which have also been seen to have dampened the near-term growth prospects. With me in the studio, I am joined by Mchimbasia Machoka, a program officer at Jctr, who will help me to discuss the measures that have been put in place by the Ministry of Finance in the wake of COVID-19. To present this show, my name is Annette Mlenga. Mchimba, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
How was your holiday? Happy Easter, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and same to you.
Okay. Mchimba, so first things first, where are we as a country in terms of the economy? By this, I mean probably as a nation, as a country at large, in that individual level.
Okay, so when we look at the Zambian economy currently, even prior to the COVID-19 scenario, we have noticed that the economy has been grappling with a lot of challenges. I could mention a few that are very familiar with a lot of people. For instance, we have the crisis of climate change that will not go away simply because...
Maybe before you go into these problems, someone out there might be asking to say, what does the term economy mean? What is it about? So how can you define the term economy to someone who's watching us right now?
Okay, when we look at the economy, or even at an individual level, maybe if I look at a budget, say for instance, you have things that you plan to spend on, and you also need to have a source of income. So the way the economy works, even at national level, we are looking at a country surviving day to day. This is through producing goods and services, as well as being able to utilize what is on the market, if I looked at the economy from that perspective.
So having explained that now, how would you term our current economic situation as a country and maybe at personal level or individual level?
Yes, and as I was mentioning to say, even prior to COVID-19, we have noted that the economy has been facing various challenges. For instance, in the year 2019, we did project to grow at about 3%, but when we looked at how the country had actually grown, in the year 2018, that growth was declining simply because we need to realize that as a country, we exist in a structure that is also prone to external factors. I could mention, for instance, the kwacha. Okay. Kwacha is weakened against other currencies such as the dollar, and that greatly affects the economy of Zambia. We are largely an import-based country. By import-based, I mean we don't produce a lot of goods and services in-house. We rely on importing, bringing in goods through the borders, for instance. If we look at marketeers, say at City Market, somebody who is selling apples, these apples are coming from South Africa. So when they get here, if the dollar is not favorable, if the kwacha is not so strong, it affects the price that they can buy these goods and services. I mean, a box of apples, again, could have been 150 kwacha maybe 2 years ago, but if you look at the current exchange rate, we're looking at marketeers trading at about 300 kwacha. And this affects them at individual level because you're putting more into your business and you will not realize much profits. I mean, if I asked you, Annette, today to say if you went to a stand and you found an apple at the price of 15 kwacha, you're going to buy one apple at the price of 15 kwacha.
I know I can't even manage an apple for 5 kwacha.
Exactly. So you find that these marketeers investing in their businesses, these are perishables, they stay on the shelves longer. Sometimes they just have to discard them simply because business has not been favorable. So what I can say is when we look at the economy from national level, at individual level, these are times that are stressful simply because we are not growing at the rate that we should. And therefore, it's not translating into increased incomes for people, improved livelihoods, just to summarize on that.
Okay, so what are some of the hazards or problems that might come with such an outbreak to any country in terms of the economy, looking at the fact that, or considering the fact that most countries are operating at the lowest ebb?
Okay, so when we look at the current crisis of the coronavirus, from my little knowledge about COVID-19, what we know is that it spread through contact to contact. So what we have seen, or some of the things that we have seen, we have to reduce. I mean, we have to social distance.
Yeah.
We have entities such as bars, such as restaurants, some that have closed partially because business has not been good. In as much as they are still allowed to operate, you see your clientele is staying home because they don't want to get affected by this pandemic. You know, they're trying to protect themselves. So as a business owner, you may be operational, yes, but then we've noticed that there are decreased profits, decreased sales, but these people still have to keep their employees in what can I say? They still have to keep their employees in employment, for lack of a better term. And then the other thing that we have also noted, when we look at the country lockdowns, for instance, South Africa.
As you talk about the lockdown, maybe you can just link your explanation or your answer to the fact that commerce, trade, and industry as a whole is affected in that line. Yes,
certainly. Commerce, trade, and industry are affected. And we also have other sectors such as tourism, we have mining, we have retail trade, like we have rightly explained. So if I look at trade and commerce specifically, we are looking at a global market. Okay, so Zambia being import-based, as I mentioned, we rely on imports that will come into the country, goods and services that we bring into the country. So if a country like South Africa, for instance, is on lockdown, what we know is that there are flight restrictions. We know travel, trade, border-to-border trade has been limited. And because of that, even as a country, we become affected. And this affects you and me to the point that we are looking at the hand of demand and supply. When supply is low, and demand is high, certainly the prices go up because we have a lot of people chasing after few goods. So the way the market operates, or the invisible hand of the market, is that to meet that demand itself, prices keep going up because you still want to purchase that good. So sometimes even businesses can exploit even individuals in such instances. I can explain the issue of hand sanitizer that was reported to have been increasing in price because of COVID. Prior to COVID-19, hand sanitizer maybe was relatively or slightly cheaper than it is trading currently. So those are some of the hazards that actually come into effect. And if I could go further, for instance, we look at the tourism sector. The Victoria Falls is currently closed right now. So the tourists that would have been coming into the country, contributing to our gross domestic product, bringing in revenue to the country, cannot travel because of the nature of the virus that is going on.
So, Mtimba, having mentioned all these hazards that you've talked about, how much impact do you think they have on our economy, especially the Zambian economy, which depends on a hand-to-mouth basis?
I think the impacts are quite negative. Like we've explained already, to say we have businesses that are not operating. I could mention the bar industry, maybe, for instance. We have a person that is the owner of a business relying on that income. And rightly so, those measures by government actually to just prohibit some of those gatherings are good because they are trying to protect the Zambian people themselves. But we have somebody who is relying on that income from their sales. We have people who are employed by that business from their sales. We can look at saloon owners themselves. Not everybody wants to go into a saloon because, you see, you're trying to limit that contact with people. So what I can say, it has negative effects on the economy itself. And like you've rightly put, so if I'm a marketeer, for example, I'm at the market, people are not coming to the market, I'm relying on that sale that I will make on that particular day. Exactly, and which is very true because it is from those sales that these marketeers, these are family people, that is how they sustain themselves, that is where they buy their food on a day-to-day basis. So
you mentioned that Zambia is an import-based country, so now looking at the lockdowns that are happening in some of the countries where we get our goods from, what can you term to be the situation if at all we ran out of the things that we need as a country, the things that we rely on, the goods that we need for us to progress or to keep on moving, but the countries that are supplying those things are not operating?
Like you rightly put, so even in the question itself, what we are saying is, if we cannot get those goods and services in the country, because the first thing is that as an economy, the Zambian economy, we have not really diversified to a point where we can produce goods and services in-house to sustain ourselves.
Would you say this is the right time that we start diversifying in all that we do, maybe in the agriculture sector?
Exactly. Diversification is a long story.
And would you say Zambia has what it takes in order to diversify to the things that would bring about a revival in the economy or bring about the circulation of goods that we import from other countries?
Certainly, we are endowed with abundant resources.
Okay.
Resources, I could look at the mining sector. We have got this virgin land. We have water in the country. We have comparative advantage in various provinces. We can look at Northwestern Province, where pineapples actually grow. We have Western Province where cashew nuts, where rice of good quality can actually be grown. So the story of diversification is long overdue. And that's the only way that we can protect our economy, if we are able to venture into various activities.
Okay, thank you so much, Mchimba. Well, viewers, we are on the Jctr corner, and today in the studio, I'm joined by Mchimba Siamachoka, a program officer from Jctr. We are discussing the impact of the measures that the Ministry of Finance put in place in order to cushion some of the COVID-19 impact on the economy, and whether these measures are adequate. So, Mchimba, apart from the COVID-19 preparedness funds that the government has set aside, we all know that government also made pronouncements to say they want to maybe put up measures aimed at cushioning national economy in view of the pandemic. Among these include the easing of liquidity. We saw that the minister announced to say they'll be reducing domestic arrears owed to domestic supplies of goods and services. They also talked about reducing the outstanding arrears to pensioners under the Public Service Pensions Fund and retirees under the Ministry of Justice. Other than that, we also saw that they talked about reducing outstanding third-party arrears and other employee-related commitments. So according to you, or according to Jctr, would you say that these measures are adequate, and are they going to work out for the Zambian people?
Okay, so before we look at the adequacy of those measures, I want to take us back to when we began the show.
Okay.
What we are saying is that the economy has not been performing so well prior to COVID, isn't it? We have a big elephant in the room that normally comes up in most of the interactions that I have, is the issue of debt. And I would say in Congole, for a viewer that is just understanding, we have borrowed heavily as a country. We are not in debt distress, but we are at high risk to debt distress. And the challenge that we have with the issue of debt is that if today Annette went to borrow $1, okay, if you borrowed it today at 11 kwacha, tomorrow, like we have seen with COVID, dollar is trading at about 18.9 kwacha, you will still pay back at that price. Okay, so what you get today is not what you will pay back tomorrow, but you still need to pay. So some of those challenges actually are also being enhanced by the COVID issue itself. So we have the issue of reducing domestic arrears, or trying to dismantle domestic arrears. While that is a positive move in the right direction, what the economy needs right now is liquidity. What we are saying is that it's not a new measure. This measure is also in the 2020 national budget. And if you look at the component of arrears that are owed to these domestic and local suppliers, it is about 26 billion kwacha. So what has been allocated is about 2.5 billion kwacha. So if somebody did the math, we still have a backlog, okay? And it does not really address the problem to the core. With the issue of the retirees, that is very timely because businesses have been affected. Retirees are not working, okay? They don't have a source of income. And that is money that they worked for.
Exactly.
They gave service
and
to the...
we saw how they were moving about, going to the ministry, crying for their monies and all that.
Yes, and this, even as far back as 5 months ago, was already happening. So it should not take a pandemic to actually push the hand of government. These are positive moves in the right direction. More can be done, and these measures should have already been thought of even prior to the crisis that we are facing.
Okay, thank you so much, Muchimba. For now, we'll go for a short break. Stay with us because we'll be back in a moment.
To advertise advertise on this program and enjoy amazing introductory rates, please call us on +260 211 290959 or +260 211 290912 or +260 953 538 000 or send us an email at loyolazam@gmail.com.
Welcome back to the Jctr Corner, a program brought to you by the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection in conjunction with Loyola TV. On the program today, we are featuring Muchimba Siamachoka, a program officer at Jctr, as we continue discussing the measures put in place by the Ministry of Finance in the wake of COVID-19. So Muchimba, before the break, you were explaining about some of the measures that the government put in place in view of the coronavirus. So according to you, are these measures sufficient enough to maybe mitigate the impact brought about by the COVID-19?
The measures are a positive step in the right direction. You see, we are journeying somewhere, but more can actually be done. Just
when you
to try
say more
and,
can be done, what exactly do you have in mind? Do you have some recommendations that you can put forward or tell the government out there, people in authority, just to try and help them and see how we can work together as a nation?
Yes, and certainly as Jctr, the first priority that we can touch on is protecting human capital.
Okay.
You see, we have people in employment who are being affected. We have businesses that have been affected. So what we are saying, are there means to actually provide income support to these small-scale businesses? We also have the issue of tax. We have some tax measures that were actually introduced by government, but we don't really have a tax measure that directly gives relief to the citizens themselves.
Just before you talk about that, among the measures that were put in place, the government was saying that they are providing relief to businesses, such as suspending some import and export duties among business owners and others, and they're also encouraging the digital financial services that they think would work out. So how then are you speaking to this kind of a measure that the government put in place? Okay,
those measures are good to protect businesses. For instance, we have suspending excise duty on ethanol itself. So we know people into the production of hand sanitizer. If we suspend these excise duties, we're actually reducing the cost of business for them.
Okay.
You know, they have more leeway to actually input into their production system. So which is good. We're encouraging businesses then in that sense. Then we also have the mining sector, where we've seen that import duties on concentrates were actually suspended. So you see, with the mining sector itself, the mines have been affected even prior to COVID-19. We have copper prices that have been quite low. So when they are low, their business actually is not flourishing well. So some of these measures, yes, are protecting those sectors that are affected even by the economic happenings. And
you mentioned the protecting of human capital, which are the employees themselves.
Yes.
Now we have seen that there was that pronouncement to say only essential workers should be reporting for work. So what's your take on that one? How is it working out? Are you working from home or you're working from the office? Are you an essential worker?
Okay, on that, you see, again, those measures, like I said earlier on, we are trying to limit that person-to-person contact.
Oh, yeah.
Because of COVID. So in that sense, some people are working from home. Some people are working on a rotational basis.
Okay.
For people that can take leave.
Is that enough to protect human capital?
Protecting human capital, in a sense, yes. That is from the health aspect.
Okay.
Okay? Because we are trying to reduce that contact to minimize on the spread of the disease.
From the economic
perspective, what we would have liked to see is a tax that actually relieves the citizens themselves. For instance, we are talking about relaxing value-added tax, VAT. We are looking at relaxing pay-as-you-earn. That is to allow people to have more disposable income.
Measures that were put up in the United States to say they should not be paying certain things. They should use that money to do, to work around programs or projects that will
Yes.
fight the coronavirus pandemic.
Yes, and even just to allow individuals themselves to survive.
Okay.
Day-to-day basis, like we said. I mean, we pay VAT on almost everything.
Okay.
16%. From a pencil, it doesn't matter where you are coming from, which sector of the economy, we are all paying VAT. While we do realize that government also needs taxes to actually survive, what we are saying is human capital should be protected. Let's allow people to have more disposable income, and when they have disposable income, they are able to demand goods and services.
Okay.
You mentioned digital financial services. Some measures were maybe to reduce transaction costs. They increased the limit of these mobile money transfer thresholds. But then, do people have the money to even make those transactions? That should be the primary question.
That's the question that we should all ask ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Okay, so Mchimba, just about a week ago, I noticed that Jctr released the March BNNB, which is the Basic Needs and Nutrition Basket. So speaking to the amount that reflected on the basket, would you say that the poor or the marginalized are on the right track in view of the coronavirus? How much impact does that mean?
Okay, so with the March Basic Needs Basket, for those that may not be aware, as Jctr, we monitor the cost of goods and services. And it's the word basic is highlighted because we are just looking at the bare minimum of what ANET would need to survive. So we factor in...
Is it just ANET or maybe ANET plus my children, my husband?
Exactly.
One person, or is it a family thing?
The basket actually reflects what a family of 5 would need to survive on for a period of a month.
Okay.
But the reality is, when we look at a family of 5, the question is how many members are 5 in a household, how many are more. Those who are more will spend more. Those who are less will certainly spend less. So when we look at the March basket itself, it was at about 7,000 kwacha.
Okay.
So even with 7,000 kwacha, in light of COVID, if maybe an employer asked me to go on half pay, it means I'm even spending less. Not many people actually take home 7,000 kwacha. We also have people in the informal sector that survive on a day-to-day. They earn their income on a day-to-day basis. So what we are saying is that in light of COVID, we do predict that certain costs may increase. When we were talking earlier on, we were talking about border restrictions. So if the price of fruits go up, if the price of potatoes go up, and we are not really producing those items in-house as a country, we have not invested in horticulture, for example, then we predict that certainly it is a challenge for the poor and vulnerable. And not only that, this has health implications. We are looking at nutrition that comes into play. You know, having an apple a day should not be a luxury for any person, okay? It should be something that we are trying to do to promote our health and our wellness.
Okay. Well, viewers, you're still on the Jctr Corner, and today we are discussing the measures put in place by the Ministry of Finance in the wake of COVID-19. In the studio, I am joined by Mchimba Siamachoka, a program officer from Jctr. So Mchimba, now one interesting measure that caught my attention was that loans at minimal interest rates should be given to or made available to bar owners, people who own nightclubs, and these other small businesses and these entrepreneurs. Now, would you say that these measures that have been put in place aimed at preventing the COVID-19 or the further spread of the COVID-19 are going to work given the circumstances right now?
Okay, given the circumstances, and even just to answer that question directly, these are not measures that we should look at short term.
Okay.
If we think we will see results in 6 months, we may not even know the state of the economy in 6 months, because the implications of COVID could still be felt even a year from now. So it's positive in the sense that we are trying to ease liquidity. We're trying to have, people should have access to money to allow them to invest in various businesses or in various livelihoods of their choice. So the criteria or the decision to provide loans certainly is good because people do not have money to invest.
Okay.
If you look at the culture of most Zambians, it's very difficult to even save a 5 kwacha because you need to use that money. You know, you have a need that is urgent.
I need to buy salt using a 5 kwacha.
Exactly my point. So on that measure, it would be nice to know what criteria will be used in terms, in terms of selecting who qualifies to receive those loans. Do people need to have collateral
Okay.
for them to access that money? Is there a leeway? Is there flexibility? How do you trace them? Because, I mean, if it's a loan, it must be paid back. Are we going to use the bank? So those are some of the questions that, the thoughts that would come to mind. But what we are saying is that there are other means and ways to allow people to have more disposable income. Loans are good if they're at minimal interest rates, because if you look at the interest rates of banks today, I mean, if you are paying over 30%, at the end of the day, your business is simply just for a long time. You know, in 5 years, you're still paying back a loan, a loan that was given to
and
you.
No profit is coming back to you because you want to finish what you're owing someone.
What you are owing. So those are, I think those are cries that the private sector has had for a long time. Okay. I mean, ideally, what is favorable is that interest rates should be very low to allow people to easily access funds, to access cash, to allow them just to invest in various businesses.
Okay, so Mchimba, maybe as we close, what would be your last word, maybe recommendations to the government? What can be done in order for us to improve if we're to achieve any growth in our economy?
Okay, certainly we need to build capacity. We are looking at capacity of domestic value chains. You know,
When you say we build capacity, in what way? Are you telling me to say maybe we should all be doctors? Are we looking at one angle, one particular sector? Should we all go into agriculture? What exactly are you trying to say when you say we build capacity? Which direction should we take?
I think the building capacity certainly takes us back to what we spoke about earlier on. We are looking at diversifying, diversifying our economy. We have the energy subsector that has experienced grave inefficiencies. I mean, we have load shedding even in the wake of COVID-19. Of up to 15 hours. We are encouraging people to constantly wash their hands. But in some areas, when there is no power supply, there is no water. You see? So those are areas certainly where we can improve, diversify in that sense. We are also looking at the agricultural sector. We are trying to grow our domestic economy. And the only people who can do that is ourselves. You know, the same incentives that we provide to these value chains. I mean, if you walked out of this building right now, when you look on the left, there's a ShopRite store there. You look on the right, we have Pick and Pay. There's nothing wrong with the global market having those economies. But how are we protecting the locals themselves? Yeah. What priorities are we giving them? Because even for the local suppliers themselves, quite right, they want to supply to these big markets. But the quality of goods that we are producing, the quantity, sometimes people cannot meet the quantities that these value chain stores are demanding. Okay. So because of that, then we are saying they shy away from that. So that is certainly one measure in terms of protecting human capital, providing income support to those who may be without jobs for the moment. Okay. You know, other countries. But of course, we cannot say Zambia is other countries, but there are lessons that can be borrowed from various countries, yes. So for instance,
at our political, maybe social context,
yes,
we try and pick something that will work.
Will work within our context. We cannot copy and paste. That will not work. It will not work. But we can certainly try.
I end up copying and pasting your own name on my paper.
We certainly will have to try to see what is it that we can adapt. What can we readapt to the Zambian scenario? Okay. I can give you an example of Nigeria, for instance. In trying to limit this person-to-person contact, they have a social benefit, like we do have social cash transfer in Zambia. We are saying if an area maybe is an epicenter, you don't want people to move to and from. So what they were doing was to provide an advance payment of about 4 months to allow the households to survive, given the context of the pandemic. Those are some of the things that we can also try to adapt in Zambia, you know, just to allow people to have that money.
Just one thing crossed my mind before we close the show. As we were explaining, I just remembered to say we had an update today where the Minister of Finance announced to say curfew should be on lockdown tomorrow. That is a total lockdown. No shop should be open. People should stay indoors. There will be a thorough screening, and there will be, you know, sanitizing the places, the markets. I don't know whether they are also targeting the houses, whether they will be sanitizing or just screening the people in their homes. What's your take on that one?
I think what I
Looking
can
at
say,
the fact that those 3 cases came from curfew.
What I can say is that our ability to combat this virus is dependent rather on the ability to test.
Okay.
We can be sitting here and saying we have 40 cases, but how do we know when we haven't done mass screening? So what we are saying, just like other countries that have gone into robustly testing and screening, that way we can contain the situation.
Okay.
So certainly to do that in Kafue, because we have realized that is a risk area, that is a good measure.
But what's your take on a person like me?
Okay.
I don't have money today.
Yes.
I needed to go to the market, maybe to sell one or two things, have something for me to put on the table. But there's this lockdown, a sudden lockdown, just happening within 24 hours. How would you respond to such a scenario?
You know, what I can say is that sometimes some decisions have to be made, and it cannot be wide consultation.
Okay.
Especially in challenging times like this, we are trying to combat a virus. So certainly the authority will have to sometimes just make that firm decision.
Okay.
I do understand the concern of a business owner, maybe a marketeer who has to go to a market to sell. But the mandate of protecting Zambia as a whole should not just be left to government. We each have a part to play.
Under a minute, Nchimba, can you just summarize your last few words? We close the show. Time is not with us. We're supposed to go ahead and do other things.
Okay, so certainly when we looked at the Ministry of Finance and the statement that came from the minister himself, some of the measures that were introduced, some are not new, some are old, some are a step in the right direction. We feel, as Jctr, we feel more can be done, given the fact that we predict the cost of living to go upwards, and it is already high for the people to survive. So what we are saying is that we are encouraging the public and even the viewers on the show to each just play their role. Let us stay home. If we don't need to move, let us certainly stay home. Let us listen to what the authorities are telling us so we can actually come out from this very quickly. The implications on the economy, some will be seen at a later stage. Some businesses are already feeling that now. So certainly we expect that government stays ahead, monitors, introduces new measures as need arises. And that's what I can just summarize.
Okay, thank you so much, Nchimba, for your appearance on the program. And thanks to you viewers for staying with us. This has been the Jctr Corner. Until next time, my name is Annette Mlenga. Goodbye.